Okay, hello, welcome. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can hear me well. Thank you very much for joining. We're going to be doing a bit of an overview on education and why digital signage for education. And the reason that we picked this and the reason that we turned this into more of a live event is because we've had quite a few studies come up, conversations come up around education, and we felt like this was a really good opportunity for us to open that up. As you can see in the corner here, we do have a restream tool, which basically allows you to communicate. So if you do have any questions around this, do feel free to drop that in as we carry on. Love for this to be more kind of two-way communication to make sure that we give you the most out of this event as possible. We're going to keep it really condensed and short, especially for the first one, maybe 15 minutes, just to get you through some of the value that's added in there. And if there are any questions, we can expand upon that 15 minutes. But I'm really, really excited to be here to actually take you through this in a live environment, because this is obviously a brand new step from us. And hopefully we'll be able to pull some more production in like this, just because I think it adds so much more engagement to the conversation. So without further ado, we're going to carry on into this. Now, this is a slide deck presentation, but I promise you it's not all just going to be me reading what's on the text in front of you. It's more just understanding where the value is for education and kind of delving into some of the experiences. I've had a good opportunity to speak to a few individuals, solutions architects and individuals in different education sectors that have utilized digital signage and found a lot of value. So what I wanted to do is kind of condense that into a few different case studies, some of the key reasons and the key methods that we see come through this, and deliver them in a nice and simple way. So if you are on the chat, do feel free to drop in and say hello. I will be responding to that, but otherwise I'm going to carry on as if you weren't there per se. So if we're talking about communication in education, there is three individual groups that are most affected. First of all, you obviously have the students, and then you have the teachers and the faculty, or whoever the teachers are in that area. And then you also have kind of more executive decision makers, those that are definitely more removed from the conversation day to day. So let's take you through some of those examples. What we're expecting that people would end up watching this video, and this video will be canned later on and on the Signage Live, Digital Signage Explored as well. We're expecting that you may be struggling to get information out to your students right now. You may be at a point where you have tens of thousands of individuals, or at least thousands of individuals that need constant communication, that constant rebuffing of what they need to know within their campus, within those locations. But there's a huge amount of information to digest and a lot of different places to find them, intranets and web pages and notice boards, whatever it might be. And it's about being able to communicate with them consistently about what's most important to them. You may be looking at investing in better communication. There may be a point where you've got old hardware, old notice boards, whatever that might be, and you're just really struggling with what you have. A lot of the conversations I've had is, especially with education, there's different levels of finances available to you. It might be that you've got a shoestring budget and you're just looking at getting something up to begin with. It may be that you've got something that's been sitting there for the last 6-7 years and really it's just looking outdated. And another one that we've picked up on a lot is compliance and being able to prove the value of the communication from a compliance perspective. So whether that be health and safety regulations, whether it might be security and safety, maybe it's just about inclusivity and being able to make sure that you're hitting all of those marks within the campus as well. So a huge kind of broad spectrum of what potentially might be covering or might start this conversation off for you. So let's dig down into those individual groups, because I think it's really important to note that is you've got the students. So obviously, mostly they're looking for direction. So new students just starting, where is the canteen? Where's my study hall? Where's the library? All of the wheres and hows is something that they're not going to be particularly familiar with. And digital signage can often help alleviate that, because it's, especially if you're looking at interactive touchscreens, for example, gives you that freedom, capability as well. It's also about finding a medium that they're familiar with. Obviously now students, it's a long time ago since I was a student, but students these days are far more in touch with online social media, engagement with video content. It's that kind of media consumption is so high. That's just typically the method that they ingest their content. So putting content on screens makes a huge amount of sense for this particular user group, because they're so familiar with ingesting that content. And if you do it right, it can be an incredibly engaging way for them to communicate. And also students looking for groups, activities, just looking to connect with their fellow student as well. One of the other things that we'd seen a lot is actually giving the students the access to the digital signage, which sounds scary at first, but actually you can control a lot of that access, so they have approval processes and things in place where there can be a faculty member in between actually covering what's actually going out onto the screens, but giving them that freedom and the power to maybe explore a little bit of that dynamic of doing the communication themselves and staying in touch that way. Teachers, obviously, they're looking to connect with those students most of the time. It's about being able to engage with them in a way that they can do en masse. One of their biggest struggles is that they are short on time, continuously speaking to new students coming in, obviously the workload that they should be focusing in on. So being able to create a way to communicate out to a huge body of students very, very quickly can be very beneficial for teachers to, A, get the messages across that they need. So whether that be art classes cancelled or some of these more technical, but also just connecting with them from a human perspective and being able to, let teachers have a little bit of their personality out there to connect with those students as well. And as I said, upcoming events, groups, activities, tests, all of these things teachers will be specifically interested in making sure that they can communicate in the fastest way possible, the most connected way possible, with the least amount of effort. And then leadership. Leadership is one that's often forgotten, but leadership, principal head teachers, directors, people that are twice removed from the students typically because they have other activities they've got to be doing. They can do things like weekly town hall meetings where they go live for a period of time to address certain situations or whatever it might be and just kind of remove that separation gap and become more of a human in the eyes of the students there. And leadership also looking to improve things like diversity, compliance, awareness. These are typically the things that are high on their list just from maybe there's a government body that's asking them to do X, Y, Z. So that's who's being affected. The outcome from what we've spoken to several different end users today is that their students can be lost, disengaged, kind of disconnected from that conversation. Teachers are frustrated, whether it be with existing platforms that they have today, or whether it just be with that there is no way of communicating out. The intranet doesn't get looked at, the newsletter barely gets touched. There's ways of saying that, really all of the work that we put in to do X, Y, and Z, it's just not getting picked up on. Then leadership, as I mentioned before, is removed, distracted from that conversation that's happening. So that's the outcome that we typically see. So let's move on. I wanted to pick apart a little bit of a case study for the University of Turin. They are a university that has 26 sites, 120 buildings over in Barcelona, and they have an incredible volume of students, 70,000 total students. Now, that's a huge amount, especially consider the different locations. It's a huge amount of movement. People moving from building to building, people being disconnected from one activity center to another. So they had a challenge where they needed to communicate in a kind of very sequenced way, but they were limited to what resources they had to themselves to achieve this. And obviously 70,000 students needs a lot of communication, but typically once you've seen a message once and it vanishes, it's gone. They won't remember it the next day. They won't remember the next week. They wanted to look at being connected and moreover, not just being able to deliver messages, but actually feel like they were generating some kind of community within their student base. So they wanted to create more inclusivity while centralizing that communication for its pupils. But they also wanted to mix a bit of that functionality with fun, for lack of a better word. It's more about being able to engage with the students on their own grounds and their own platform. So things like pulling in social media was a really important thing for them because it was not just about telling people about, what's going on that day. It's about engaging with the other students in that area. So social media was a huge pull for them. And if you're looking at digital signage for the first time, that's something that's really easy to utilize, being able to pull existing content that you've already built and basically just taking all of that together and putting it onto the screen in a unified way that A, looks attractive, and B, doesn't cost you all of your time and resource to build. It's actually about utilizing your existing communication channels and putting it in a way, in a term that I like to use, which is by osmosis. So your social media is there all the time and the students will start to engage with that by osmosis by regularly seeing it in front of them. So they did that. And how did they do that? Well, they had 71 digital signage devices, a display of social media feeds. You can kind of see an example of that on the screen that we can see there. And in the background, you can just about potentially see two of the other screens that they had hung high, and that's actually running intranet content. So they're just pulling directly their intranet feed onto a digital signage screen. They can utilize other areas of the canvas. So as an example, if you wanted to have multiple zones of content on the screen at any given time, then you could do, and actually have the intranet take up one piece and the social media take up the other. The other thing that they utilize, which I've seen work on mass very successfully, is local playlists and using that at scale. To explain what a local playlist is, it's basically taking a feed, let's call it a channel of content, and dedicating that to an individual or a group of individuals, and then saying that this particular playlist only appears on these players, but not just full screen. It could be in the zone of a screen. So as an example, you might say, the left-hand side of this screen is dedicated to the students or to the teachers, and we're going to give them permission and access to update their own content automatically with full autonomy. And the right-hand side is more for, you can have a student's corner in the section, which is kind of very clearly dedicated to students just uploading pictures from their phone. Or alternatively, you could have an approval process in there. But by doing that and utilizing that local playlist, they can actually give teachers access to update the screens that were closest to their area. So being able to really dissect, so you don't have the solutions architects, which are typically there to actually navigate the installation, the build, the fact-finding, going through the RFPs, going through all the technical piece to make everything work the first time. They can then hand the keys off to the right individuals and say, here you go, we can look after things for you from a network management perspective, make sure the players are turned on, working as they're expected. But you can take control of that content and you can really manage that process. And that really alleviates some of the pressure of what could potentially be quite daunting when it comes to content creation, because you don't want to get bogged down in creating hundreds and hundreds of pieces of content every day. It's not manageable and it's not sustainable. And unless you're maybe in a retail space or something like that, where you're far more adamant that your content has to look a specific certain way, you want to get the message across from the right people as fast as possible without it taking too much of their time. So the results of that was just the better ability to deliver knowledge and information to thousands and thousands of students every day. So being able to have this kind of this feed that people are constantly ingesting. And it's interesting, what I've found, especially from experience with speaking to university hospitals, which was another one, was that once you start building it, people will start to take notice of it and request more from it. As you progress into this, you'll find that there's more and more individuals getting engaged with what you're looking to achieve. They're saying, can we actually do this? As I mentioned before, if you wanted to do something like have a town hall where it goes live for a period of time, you can actually use the same service software that I'm using to go live today, which by chance is OBS, and have that set up as a stream process that is scheduled. The ability to segment that responsibility, so everyone that needs to take responsibility can do without taking all of the responsibility at the same time. And better inclusion and involvement by and for the students. I think that's the end goal that most education members, especially, we get communicated to by two major departments. Either it's an AV team, especially if it's over in the US, or if it's an IT technical team in Europe, typically are the ones that kind of lead this on. But it's worth mentioning as well that there will be several members involved in this decision-making process. There's a level of how can we utilize digital signage in the best way possible. One of the other things that isn't necessarily part of the University of Turin case study, but something that I've seen mentioned several times, is trigger of content on the fly. So what you can do is create these triggers that automatically change the content on a individual screen or a cluster of screens at the same time within seconds. And the benefit of that is you can start to pre-plan in advance for good, bad, in different situations where you need to make immediate content changes. And unlike, let's say, an IT technician or someone who's very capable and confident and aware of how to use a particular platform, the web triggers isn't that. You can just have a simple login, and then you have your 4 buttons that do the 4 different triggers that you want. So as an example, if there is a fire, you can actually have a button on a range of teachers' phones that allow them to warn people immediately across the entire campus. Or you might just want to say that the art department wants to be able to, I keep going back to the art department, let's try pick a different one. Let's say the IT department or the IT education department wants to be able to trigger when someone's managed to achieve a perfect grade. They could go and trigger that immediately as a celebratory way. But alternatively, with the web triggers, if you wanted to, you could actually start looking at utilizing that in a more automated way. So as an example, there is a company out there called Layered Solutions that I happen to know off the top of my head. They build implementation for fire systems. So if you wanted to have your web triggers automatically trigger content when there was a fire alarm, then that could all be built into the system. And you can preload all of the content to show the nearest fire exits, the nearest fire extinguishers. And because you're pre-planning all of this in the content on the screen, there's zero interaction with it. Should an emergency like that happen, you can just go without having to make any, you don't even need to think about it. You just walk away and the content would trigger on the screens immediately. So that's my kind of condensed overview of education for digital signage and where the value is. And I said there's a really good, if you haven't looked at it before, if you go to signagelive.com and look into case studies, there's a really good conversation I have with someone from the technical solutions architect, blanked on the name there, from University Hospitals. They gave some really good insight, actually. One of the better insights that he gave me was that they utilized QR codes a lot to engage with individuals. So if there was a particular PDF or whatever it was that needed to be downloaded, they would have those in the QR codes. Not only is that beneficial because all the students could just quickly go and grab that information on the fly, they could also then track the metrics of that and give a bit of a return on investment to say, look how much this is being utilized from a board perspective. So if you are considering using digital signage for education, you're at the very beginning of that process, or you're going down that process at the moment, here's a few things that I advise you do. First of all is watch this episode. So if you're here and you're watching this right now, congratulations, step done. Decide who needs to be involved. So marketing, IT, head teachers, pupils. Now you might not want to involve all of those people day one. I definitely wouldn't advise that. I think it's more a case of strategically planning for the future, saying if successful by the 3-month, the 6-month, the 9-month process, maybe we want to invite the pupils in here. IT, I think, is always going to be their day one, to be totally honest with you. But head teachers, I think the conversation should start earlier rather than later, trying getting all of those individuals involved and on board with that idea, making it easy. There's a range of different template services out there. Canva's a really good one, but there's also ScreenFeed that do kind of automation of that content where maybe they're not prolific designers, but you could give them a template where they can just change the text and update that really quickly. So deciding who needs to be involved ahead of time is going to save you headache later, and getting buy-in from those individuals to show them the value. Contact us after that. If you're ready, if you made that decision, feel free to contact us. There's some QR codes coming up in a minute if you want to. I haven't directly mentioned this, but we are Signage Live, so we're the CMS portion, which is the content management system, which allows you to deliver the content to those screens. Those are the elements you'll need. You'll need a CMS. You'll need hardware, whether that be a system on chip, which is all built into the screen itself, or a screen, or kind of a stupid screen in essence, and then a player that sits behind it. And then you'll need someone who help you design, implement, and actually install all of those. But we can help you with that. If you want to come and reach out to us, we're more than happy to get all of that conversation started. Then I definitely advise looking at a simple proof of concept. Even if it's just one screen, having one screen up and running with some rudimentary content that you've built together, you will start to see the value. You will start to see people engaging with it, genuinely just sit in front of it and ingest what people are doing with that content, whether they're watching it, whether they're just walking by. It will help you understand where is good to position them and where is going to have the most effect. Once that proof of concept is, I'm almost certain what you'll see is more people will be interested and involved with a bit. Where does this come from? How can we utilize this? I'd love to have one of these near my door, near my window, wherever that might be. Devise a content strategy is next. As I mentioned, it's not all about volume. You can do this without creating a huge amount of extra work for yourself. You can go and pull your own dashboards or reports or intranets. You can go and grab your own social media content if you're already doing Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, whatever that might be, or even pulling from just email collateral and dropping that into a preloaded template. There's also things like calendar integrations, which are all for free. You've got clock, weather, some of the default kind of assets that are really, really useful to get started, and always useful, especially around campus. Clocks obviously make a lot of sense for that. Then I would say kind of understanding the features and the requirements. So we've mentioned a few there: local users, web triggers. There's quite a few different ones on there. I definitely advise having a look into that in a little bit more detail, just so you understand what you need, so you're not accidentally missing something, which will then cost you more in the long term later if you have to retroactively go try and fix that. And then build slowly. Measure your return on investment. Pick a few key metrics. Say, we're going to go with QR codes and see how many downloads we get. Let's start with the first month. Okay, we've got 30, 50 downloads. Great. How can we expand on that? Is there more content? Is there a need for more information that we can get out there? How can we track that better? That, I think, once you've come down to the top to the bottom of that list, you'll be in a much better positioned than probably 90% of the individuals we speak to at the very beginning of their conversation. You'll be fully prepared for that conversation and you'll know what you want to get out of it. It'll also be much easier to kind of get buy-in from a executive or a high up level to say this is from a funding perspective something that's going to add value to our campus as well. And that is pretty much it. So thank you very much for watching. You can download, I'm going to keep these up and running on here just for a second. So you've got a PDF QR code on the left, which you can download, just a bit of a condensed version of what we talked about today. Why would you use digital signage for education? And on the right-hand side, if you want to learn a little bit more, you can go over to signagelive.com. On the top right-hand, there is a Learn and Explore section where we go through many kind of versions of what digital signage can add value to from different perspectives. And also, I definitely recommend if you go over there, having a look at the case study. Hopefully, if you've got a relatively smartphone, you can just put your camera up there and it should be able to scan it and take you straight over to the link. That is all that I wanted to walk you all through today. Thank you very much again. We'll be sending this out on canned video, so if you do want to go back and watch it again, you can do. If there are any questions, feel free to reach out to us at signagelive.com, and you can always go onto the chat bar in the bottom right-hand corner and ask any questions there. We'll be more than happy to help, or you can arrange a conversation with us directly and we can speak to you directly as well.